Fucking
the gender
awesome.
fuckery.
Possibly a podcast name.
Like, we need another one of those.
Right. It's a freebie.
Podcast ideas.
That's right. It needs to be about something you cannot shut up about and everyone wishes you would. That was the advice I got.
So, like, yeah, I guess, like, my comment about people at, like, the upper echelons of society doing whatever the hell they wanted, being weird, like, that's pretty much what our celebrity class is for.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And there was, like, a, a tabloid, business and
totally.
everything. Yeah.
So, okay, so we're basically still in Rome.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not as explicit, but yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there was, like, generally, usually, anyway, there's less, like, deposing people in power and, like, killing them violently in the streets going on, in America right now. But aside from that, a lot of this is sounding very familiar.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, I feel like I'm mucking around in the basement of the patriarchy with the work that, like, everything. It's like, oh my God, that's where this comes from. Oh my God. Like, that's why we still think this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then the interesting thing that keeps popping into my head is, like, how much of their religion specifically, but also, like, culture, the Romans borrowed from the Greeks before them.
Yeah, they appropriated a lot.
Yeah.
Like, a lot.
Appropriated is a better word.
Yeah, they appropriated almost everything. And I think that there are scholars who would, want to quibble with me about exactly what the Romans adopted versus what they didn't adopt in ancient Greece, and that's a whole rabbit hole that I'm not that interested in going down, but I definitely think that they appropriated, like, large amounts of Greek culture, for sure. But they kind of put their own spin on it, too,
In what ways? Like, what are your examples?
Well, I think that the ancient Greeks were pretty warlike. They had the Spartans, but, like, the Romans really took the colonization thing and just blew it up. I mean, they wound up colonizing Greece in the end. They took the slavery culture of ancient Greece, which I have not studied a lot of, but I don't think ancient Greece had latifundias. Like, they took that and blew it up. I mean, their gods, like, I haven't studied all of their gods and figured out what the difference is, but, like, there's one that I've done a deep dive on, which is Dionysus. Dionysus was a Greek god, and
right.
Yeah, and the way that the ancient Romans made him over into Bacchus and then into a god called Liber Pater was kind of sanitizing, because Dionysus was specifically a god of, enslaved people in ancient Rome. Not necessarily in Greece. I'm not exactly sure how that tracks in Greece, but in ancient Rome, a lot of enslaved people worshiped Dionysus, and they kind of defanged Dionysus because he was at the heart of two of the three servile wars that happened.
Whoa.
Yeah. And he was very gender bendy, by the way. And I don't think that was a coincidence either. Yeah.
Oh, right. Chaos. When people gend to the bender roll.
Gend to the bender roll.
There are basically women in ancient Rome who were kind of held up as, like, the ideals, and you don't hear that much about them. Like Octavia, who was also one of Mark Antony's wives, who was, like, so nice and pure and sweet and submissive. And then there's this lady Servilia, who was a mistress of Julius Caesar's. They were never married. She was also the mother of Brutus, who was part of the assassination of Julius Caesar.
Ouch.
It was all intertwined. It's funny because Servilia and Fulvia in this time period I really saw as kind of foils for each other, because Servilia was like the velvet glove power broker operating behind the scenes. You don't hear a lot about her, but she's definitely, in my headcanon, which is probably definitely totally true. She's kind of operating behind the scenes, and she's kind of a fixer, and she's very, like the person to talk to, but she's not, women weren't allowed in the Senate building. So she's not like, wielding power in a very overt way, versus Fulvia, who just couldn't do it. She just could not operate that way. She was a sledgehammer,
That's pretty much what I notice in like history, though, is you only get written about if you're really, really, really good, or if you're really, really, really bad, and nobody really cares about you if you did something really, really good. They're like, okay, yeah, that person was really, really good. But if you were like a
you just didn't
woman
mess up.
who did something really, really, really bad, then everybody wants to know about it and people talk about it.
Absolutely.
Also,
yeah. Like,
when me and Lindsay have our bone marrow baby someday, I want to name her Vulvia.
can we back up?
Oh,
What's a bone marrow baby?
when you take the bone marrow and like use the DNA to like make another human with it, like female bone marrow and female eggs to make a whole nother human.
Whoa. Is this from Ancient Aliens?
No.
Wow.
It's a thing. In fact, Hank Green was talking about it today. Yeah.
Oh, really?
And I decided if we ever do that, we're going to name her Vulvia.
Do it.
Vulvia.
With
Yeah,
a
with
V?
a V.
Like, this is the most lesbian baby that has ever existed.
This is our lesbian baby Vulvia.
And we're going
That's
to raise
amazing.
you to be like Vulvia.
Yeah.
And yes. So Fulvia was, first off, she was a gang leader. She had several husbands. Her first one was this. She's actually cool because you kind of get into the lower classes of Roman society a lot because she moved around. Like, she and her husband Clodius were gang leaders, and they kind of, like, gang violence was a big part of ancient Roman politics, but they really made it into this, you know, like, really big thing. You know, like, they had, like, just armies of people in the city who would fight for them if they needed to, like, pass a bill or whatever, you know. And, like, Fulvia was very involved in this in the way that the ancient Roman sources talk about it. It's all Clodius, which was her husband, but they were also described as joined at the hip, and Fulvia would push forward his policies even after he died. So, you know, like, she was very involved.
Oh, yeah.
In this. Like,
you know what they say, behind every great man.
That's right.
Woman.
There's a Vulvia.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then eventually she married Mark Antony. She was, like, they were both two just, like, absolutely chaotic war elephants who just like to fuck shit up together. Like, they were both completely out of hand. And then, eventually, she clashed with Octavian, who was Julius Caesar's 18-year-old heir. Mark Antony was Julius Caesar's right-hand man, thought he should be heir, but Julius Caesar just happened to make this 18-year-old who nobody had heard of heir right before he died. Mark Antony and Octavian were, like, clashed a lot, and eventually Mark Antony fucked off to Alexandria to hang out with Cleopatra, and Fulvia went to war with Octavian, led armies in battle over some stuff, ostensibly on Mark Antony's behalf, but everything that was on Mark Antony's behalf was also about her power. So, yeah, she was really cool.
Wait, so she was married to Antony.
Yes.
And then he was mad at Octavian. And he got so mad that he was like, fuck this, I'm going to Egypt. And went and started, like, palling around, by which I mean, like, having a lot of sex, like, very publicly with Cleopatra. And while he was gone, Fulvia was like, well, fuck that, I'm going to take down Octavian.
Yes. Well, I mean, the parts about, like, how Mark Antony met Cleopatra, they're a little hazy. But eventually what happened was he fucked off to Alexandria to hang out with Cleopatra. And
to Alexandria.
yeah, in Egypt. And Fulvia, meanwhile, while he was doing that, went to war with Octavian.
Huh. Okay, so this is definitely me just, like, putting what I want to see on it. But I totally am having this, like, this maybe fan fiction that I'm writing in my head where...
Oh my god, we do that too all the time.
where, like, Antony is just in a consensually non-monogamous relationship with Fulvia and Cleopatra at the same time. And they're, like... So Fulvia's like, I still love you even if you fucked off to Alexandria, and I'm going to fight this war for you because I believe in you. Like, that's very sweet.
Possibly. I can't disprove that. There are a lot of ancient sources. Well, there are ancient sources that say that the reason she went to war or, you know, something was to do with, like, she was upset that Mark Antony was with Cleopatra and she wanted to bring him back to her side and fight this battle for him. I cannot say if that's true or not. I don't know. You know, like, in ancient Rome, they really did not necessarily expect fidelity of men. But, oh boy, did they ever expect it of women.
Also, I mean, considering she's like very complex, I mean, I imagine it's a little bit of everything and more.
Yeah, there was probably a lot that had very little to do with Mark Antony at all involved in her decision making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So she's one of my favorites. I love her.
Yeah. But who was the other one we were talking about? Is it Cervixia or Cervixia?
Cervixia was Cervixia was the kind of, I see her as very much the opposite of Fulvia. Like, she's kind of one of those velvet glove people who's like in the background and subtly influencing people. And she really knew how to, you know, work the system and go with the expected women's power structure. There is not a lot written about her and how she did this. There are a few clues in the ancient sources, but nothing like really concrete. But that is absolutely my interpretation of Cervixia. Yeah.
It's really interesting. Like, I feel that in our current culture, like, women often get blamed for being, like, sneaky, you know, and manipulative. And I feel like the reason that tends to be, like, the reason that women sometimes operate in a sneaky way is because we are still taught, like, we're not supposed to be publicly influencing things.
Yeah.
Like, well, yeah, the patriarchy made us that way, and other women uphold it. And so if you want to do anything, you have to be, like, sneaky, like, in the background. And
yeah, or live like Fulvia, just completely say fuck that to everything and deal with the consequences, which is, like, inevitably at least 50% of people hate you at all times.
Absolutely. Yeah, go to war. You know,
so you're either like Cervixia or Vulvia.
These are the best names.
Those will be the names in my fan fiction.
Cervixia and Vulvia.
Yeah.
These are the two bone marrow babies.
Vulvia lived more on the outside. She was more visible, whereas Cervixia was much more interior.
That's right.
Oh my god, anatomy jokes.
Oh. Wait, are we still talking about vaginas?
I'm talking about cervixes. I don't know about you.
I was definitely also thinking about vaginas, so I guess we were pretty close.
Oh my god. So, okay, my like next question on my list was going to be about the role of religion in reinforcing gender roles, but now we're like way far away from that. So I'm not really sure if we can bring the conversation back around.
Well, I do have a lot of thoughts on that, actually. And a lot of it, I think, ties into what we've already talked about. First off, this is like a super broad topic, and I'm just going to preface this by saying I have not studied all of the religions and cults dedicated to all of the gods that were in ancient Rome, you know, and also the ones that came from other places that people worshipped, because there were a lot of religions that came that were kind of fads or like, you know, things that popped up that people started adopting in ancient Rome, because the ancient Romans were appropriators, you know.
Good point.
Yeah, so, and a lot of the time, the thing about these religions at this point is that people didn't write down, like, they didn't have Bibles that wrote down what they did to worship this god. Like, it's all pretty vague, and we have a few inscriptions here, and we have some carvings over here, and from there we try to piece together what these rituals were, but it's, like, kind of hard to discern a lot of the time. So, there were some gods that really did reinforce the gender roles. For example, the Vestal Virgins, always chaste or you're going to get buried alive. Like, there's that. There's Mithras, who was a war god, all about justice. You could only be in the Mithras cult if you were a man, a cisgender man. But one really interesting thing that Jen and I found, we were researching our Spartacus series, and Spartacus's rebellion was the third of 3 large slave rebellions in ancient Rome that were called the Servile Wars, and each of them occurred about like 30 years apart on a cycle. And all of them, at the heart of each of these rebellions, was a gender-bending god or goddess. And that's really cool. Each one. Not a coincidence, right? So,
chaos. When genders bend.
When the genders bend, look out.
Oh, shit.
Right? And this is why people get really upset about, like, anybody, like conservatives especially, get upset about people stepping outside the gender binary today because chaos. Oh, no. You know?
Yeah. The systems start